Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we have a chance to take a look at an extremely unusual and very cool version of this Finnish M31 Suomi submachine gun. This is a commercial export pattern with a forward pistol grip and a bipod mounted on it, and only a very small number of these were manufactured. So the origin of the M31 Suomi dates to October of, predictably, 1931, when the first batch of guns was ordered by the Finnish military. Now, the Finnish military version did not have this pistol grip and did not have the bipod. However, the manufacturer, Tikkakoski, was interested in producing these guns both for the Finnish military and also for any commercial export contracts that they could manage to find. So in the early 1930s especially, they were taking the submachine gun around, demonstrating it throughout the Baltic states. In Germany, there was potential interest as far as South America for a gun like this. This was, there weren't a ton of submachine guns floating around in the 1930s, not like we think about them after World War II. And the Suomi, the M31, had certainly a reasonable potential for international sales. Now, well, we'll talk about how many were actually sold in a minute, but first let's take a closer look at this because you almost never see this pattern around. So despite there being a standard military pattern of the submachine gun, Tikkakoski as a factory was perfectly happy to offer different variations for commercial sale, and that's what we see here. So I should point out that there are versions out there that were purchased with vertical front grips but no bipods, and there are also versions with bipods but not vertical front grips. These parts are largely interchangeable and modular, and it was really easy for the factory to deal with different small-scale orders for these. So both types, with either one of these extra parts, were actually ordered by the Finnish police, and there were, throughout the 1930s, small, even down to the level of a single gun, commercial sales. The way the bipod works is quite simple. There is simply the band that holds the front sight on, also has an attachment point for the two bipod legs. They're held in place by a little spring clip that is screwed to the barrel jacket here. And then, actually it's rather neat, the two bipod legs fold together into basically a round bar profile with flat insides. So they just split in half into semicircular elements. Little feet on the end of the bipod. There is a little bit of pivot you can get from the bipod, but it comes from rotating one of the feet in. So if the legs are firmly planted, there's not really any adjustability in the bipod. Now, one of the neat elements about the M31, the Suomi in general, is that the barrel shroud is easily removed. You simply open the locking lever, rotate this about 45 degrees, and you can pull it right off. So for the factory to add a bipod shroud to a gun was very simple. They just manufacture a slightly different version of the shroud, and that can fit on any standard gun. The vertical front grip is a little different, a little more integrated into the frame. But again, you can see that it's a standard frame in here that this front grip strap has been added to. So the theory, of course, is just that some people think that this will provide better handling to the gun rather than holding on to the front of the barrel shroud. The magazine that we have in here is one of the early pattern of M31 magazines. There were actually two versions of these, two slightly different lengths. The textbook explanation is that this is a 20-round magazine. This one looks a little bit longer. It might be extended out to 25, but I don't know for sure. Like the magazines that would follow, these are double-stack, single-feed designs, and originally the M31 was made with a 20-round box magazine like this, and a 40-round drum. In 1936, they adopted a 71-round drum that would really be the standard magazine going forward. The other magazine that we're familiar with today is the 50-round quad stack box magazine. That was introduced in the early 1940s after the Winter War. The rest of the gun is really completely standard, We have a sling swivel in the left side of the stock and a matching sling swivel out on the left side of the shroud. The serial number on this particular example is 2408. There were 4,000 of these delivered to the Finnish Army by the time the Winter War started, and all the way up to that point, commercial sales were being made. So this probably dates from mid to maybe late 1930s. We don't know who originally ordered these. However, you can see that this one actually has an Israeli property mark on it because these guns, a batch of these, ended up in Israel. We don't know who the original purchasers were, but it was obviously enough of a quantity purchase that they were able to be sold as a group of guns later on to Israel. So 50, maybe 100 tops of this particular pattern were ever made for all the customers combined. Interestingly, on this particular example, almost certainly because of the fact that it ended up in Israel, the markings on the rear sight have been milled off. You can see the panel cut there. This would have originally said patent 1932, and on the opposite side with the serial number, it would have been marked Suomi Tikkakoski, but not anymore. Ultimately, Tikkakoski was unable to find any significant external contracts or foreign contracts for M31 submachine guns. And of course, once the Winter War began, all production went to the Finnish Army. And after World War II, there wasn't really demand for a complex, milled, expensive submachine gun like this one. So what's particularly interesting here is that we know a small batch of these were manufactured. There are a handful of them floating around, and they actually ended up in Israel, of all places. And that's where this one, and a couple others with it, actually came out of the Southern Arms Depot in Israel when they started surplusing guns in, I think, the 1970s. They sold off some of these where they had actually been used somewhat notably by Israeli forces during the War of Israeli Independence. So just a fascinating bit of world travel for a very unusual and interesting pattern of Finnish submachine gun. There aren't, in fact, all that many submachine guns out there at all with bipods, and this is one of the few. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.